Hello and welcome to the Bubbling Up Podcast, a show about the people and places of Hot Springs, South Dakota, and the Southern Black Hills. I'm your host, Justin Gosman, and this show is coordinated through the Hot Springs Area Chamber of Commerce. Bubble Up. The Cambridge Dictionary defines bubble up as to rise to the surface or to become obvious. And that's why this show came about. I want the stories behind our fascinating small South Dakota town to rise to the surface and be heard. Hot Springs, South Dakota, population 3,460 today, is a community in the southwestern corner of South Dakota, about 50 miles south of Mount Rushmore. Founded in 1890, we got our name from, you guessed it, naturally warm mineral springs that bubble up from underground. The stories seem endless, and it's my hope that this show will enlighten not only the fellow residents of and potential visitors to Hot Springs as to the intriguing history of our community, but also to its ongoing inner workings today, the stories behind our local businesses and nonprofit organizations and events, the voices that make a community what it is, and that are working to make it what it can be. I hope you'll join me on this journey. Well, I'm sitting down with Rajni Lerman, who is one of the nominees for Citizen of the Year this year. Congratulations, Rajni, on being nominated.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for sitting down with us for the Bubbling Up podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Trying to stay warm, but other than that, doing excellent.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm excited to talk with you about a lot of the things that you've been involved in the community. But one of the first questions that I always like to ask all of our guests on the show is, if you're not originally from Hot Springs, how did you end up here? And I know that you're not originally from Hot Springs, so how did you end up here?
Good question. Well, it's kind of, I don't know if it's an interesting story or not, but my husband, Uriah Llewellyn, he has been coming here for decades. He first came to Wind Cave as a student in the forestry program from Fort Collins to do a project where they were studying the relationship between the buffalo and the prairie dogs.
Very cool.
So he was just doing he had to measure blades of grass for this project. Anyways, he fell in love with the Black Hills and started coming back year after year after year. So when I met him and obviously we started our relationship, he told me about the Black Hills, and we came here, trying to remember which year it was that we came for him just to show me around, because it was one of his favorite stomping grounds. So I had come the first time maybe about a year before we moved here. So also during that time, we had been living in Colorado in the Boulder area, and in 2012, we got married and we bought a camper and started traveling, so semi-retired.
Okay.
And when we traveled in our camper, we would spend a lot of time in wilderness areas, places that were, or small towns that were less populated, and that was something we both really enjoyed. So
Sure.
Every time we would come back to Colorado, though, the busyness of the area just really started getting crazy, and realizing that we don't want to live in such a busy area. We want to live in a quieter place. So we just started having a conversation about, moving somewhere someday that's a little bit less busy than where we were living. Well, that summer we were in Hawaii and on one of our little vacations, and he started looking at land in the Black Hills, much to my surprise. So he said, when we got back, he said, I found some land. I want to go check it out. So we came up here. It was up Hot Brook, actually, and we came to check out the land, and we both liked it, but for one reason or another, it didn't work out. But then we started kind of investigating other land, other property. We didn't really find anything we liked, but then we actually were driving down this road. We were looking at quarries because some of you know my husband Uriah is a mason.
Yeah.
And he also had a stone quarry, so he was very interested in this. So we started snooping around, trying to find out where did all this beautiful stone come from. And we were going down this road looking for the quarry, and someone was like kind of watching us because it was kind of, anyways, we weren't maybe not supposed to go down that road. we stopped and on the way back out, we didn't find the quarry, and I said, hey, let's go talk to this guy because he was checking us out.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out we had a really nice conversation with this guy, Lance, and then he asked us what we were doing here, and we said we were looking at land. He's like, well, did you look at my house? And we're like, no, and he told us where it was, and as soon as we pull up to our now current house, we both fell in love with it.
Wow.
Even though we were looking for land, and even though it was supposed to be some futuristic time to move here, everything just fell into place, as a lot of people have told stories about how they got here, right?
Yeah,
so it was one
absolutely.
of those situations. We made an offer, he accepted it.
Wow.
And we had other commitments in Colorado, but we did move here probably like 4 or 5 months later.
Wow.
So,
serendipity.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so cool. And so since you moved to Hot Springs, you very quickly became involved in the community and bringing some of your ideas to fruition, which has been fascinating to watch. One of the earliest ones that I remember was the Ditch the Disposables campaign. Now, I talked a little bit about that with Lucy a few episodes ago, but I want to hear your side of how that came about, because that really took off pretty well.
It did. I would love to talk about that program, but I have to say that it's not just me coming with ideas. I swear to God, the minute I moved here, people were coming to me and bringing things up. So, like, for example, that first week that I moved here, I was swimming in Evans Plunge, and somebody approached me and said, oh, I hear that you really like local food. So that sent me on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved here, that first month, they were talking about recycling. So there, it wasn't just me saying, hey, I have these ideas that I want to do.
Right.
Now, the Ditch the Disposables, of course, I had met Lucy. I was very attracted to her shop and what she was doing there. We have similar values. And I think she had just posted something about this, Ditch the Disposable, some idea that she had. She's got a lot of wonderful ideas.
Yeah.
But as a shop owner, she's very committed to her shop, and she doesn't have as much time.
Right.
I had the time because I wasn't, I wasn't being hired for my professional organizing skills. People didn't really know me yet in the community, so I went to talk to her about that idea she had, and just we have this synergy that she has an idea and then I share an idea, and our synergy together usually starts creating a thing, a manifested idea. So that's where that became this idea of, actually I brought a sample, this bag of creating actually cooperatively checking with other businesses in the community to cooperatively buy these reusable shopping bags, because things are usually cheaper if you buy them in mass.
Right.
And then because Hot Springs was already working on, this new logo and stuff, we thought, why not, add this, keep Hot Springs beautiful and sustainable. So it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone, even though I don't like that phrase of killing birds.
It's a very violent.
But accomplishing two things at once.
Yeah.
Bringing that awareness that, hey, reusable bags are great and they save the environment from not using the plastics, and also advertising Hot Springs, because visitors could buy the bags and take them
with.
Yeah. So that was just one of the starting ideas.
Absolutely. Well, and then you touched upon the farmers market, and you've been actively involved in getting that off the ground as well. I know that there had been folks in town that had been talking for years about how do we make this feasible? How do we get it pulled together? Who all needs to come to the table? How did the farmers market really get off the ground?
So with the farmers market, actually, when I was making that reference to being in the plunge and someone asked me about local food, there was actually 4 of us that met for an entire year talking about various projects of ways to bring fresh local food, because that was like complaints that people were bringing to me, like, why we don't have any fresh food here, we're the end of the food line. So we had talked about lots of ideas. just education, and we did talk about a farmer's market, but one of the projects we started talking about was community gardens, because Margaret Hunter had already worked on that. So we kind of investigated that, and we kind of brought people in the community that were interested in that and talked about that for a while. But in the end, it just didn't seem like there was going to be enough support, enough people on the ground working towards that goal.
Right.
And at the same time, when a lot of these ideas were happening, that's when we started having those community engagement process. So all the people I had been working with on this farmers market, and some of my other friends that were interested in health and wellness, I encouraged them, hey, come to this meeting, because I'm really about networking, and I think more people that have the same interests can get more done. So so some conversations came up there, but there was this huge period of time where our group really hadn't coalesced and was really not moving forward. And it was during that time that I just started thinking, I could probably pull this off by myself. I have a degree in recreation, which means that I have planned things, and I'm also very organized. So I had the skills that I knew that I could create an event without a lot of help from a lot of different people. So I decided myself to just take that on. And I had been talking with Andrea Powers, and she said, hey, you really need to get the farmers involved. And I had already been interviewing them and questioning them and saying, hey, how come you guys, what do you think about the farmers market? And they were kind of curious, but I think they had some tentative,
some reservations.
Thank you for that. So I started pulling together a lot of information from other sources in South Dakota and finding out about what other farmers markets have done, and I kind of presented that to them. And then, once it just kind of coalesced, they started coming to meetings, the farmers that were already here growing food, some key players, and we formed they said, yeah, let's go for it. So. Yeah.
And how have those been attended? Because they are put on, it's weekly throughout the summer, and what's the period that it runs through, month-wise?
So it usually starts the third week in July, because that's when the majority of them really had crops ready to go. Some people start earlier, but in general, that was the consensus. So it's mid-July through the end of August. Sometimes we go through the first week in October. And then we, from the interviewing that I had done early on, we decided to go on a Friday night, because some of the farmers were actually selling in Rapid City on Saturday mornings. So for those of you who really wish it was Saturday morning, this is why, because we want to make it accessible for everyone and for all the farmers. I didn't want to take that revenue away from them. I mean, they might have not participated. So Friday night seems to be good for most people. I know it's not, we start earlier afternoon, and I know some people still work. So it's hard to meet everyone's need, but we really try to listen. We send out a survey every year to make sure that we're, taking care of what the community wants.
Good. Wonderful. So one of the other things that you were working on, among the many, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. One of the ideas that you had, because you joined Keep Hot Springs Beautiful, and then they had been doing their Earth Day rummage sale for many, many years, and then you basically suggested, why not add an educational component to this? You have all these people that come in anyway. Why not give them something to take away beyond just what they purchase? Something that they can think about when they're at home. Thinking about sustainability and taking care of the environment. How did that come about, and how has that grown, adding on the expo to the Keep Hot Springs Beautiful rummage sale, the Earth Day rummage sale?
So I joined the Keep Hot Springs Beautiful board right when I got here because of the recycling, really. And so that event is our biggest fundraiser, so it's a really good event for our community. And obviously, when we give our stuff away for other people to use it, that is keeping stuff out of the landfill, and it's great. But when I come in from Boulder, Earth Day is really celebrated, and it is an educational, and it's kind of a celebration of, hey, you know, people took the time in the 70s to say, hey, we need to care for our environment. So I just had a whole different frame of mind about what Earth Day meant to me, and I did bring it up the first year after I experienced, like, hey, maybe we should be doing this. And I think that it's a lot of work that the activities that Keep Hot Springs Beautiful already does. I mean, we're a decent sized board, but you know, we're not a huge board, and people have jobs. So there's not a lot of extra energy to start new stuff because of what we're already doing. So the first year I had the idea, but I didn't know, because I'm doing all these other things, if I had the energy to create something new. But it's really important to me, so I just told, you know, the board that I'm ready to take it on. So last year was our first year that we did it, and I utilized some of the programs that I had already got going as kind of a catalyst for the individual activities. So for example, we had a farmer's market booth, and I asked one of them, you know, could someone do an activity? And the Black Hills Friends of Pollinators, we haven't talked about that. That was another booth. Ditch the Disposables had a booth. So each of the different themes around caring for the earth had its own booth. So the first year was the hardest because it was like creating something from scratch is a lot of work. But fortunately, I asked friends and people with similar interests to help out, and people did show up and help. So it was really, I think it was pretty well received. I don't think we didn't get as many like young people and families in there as we had hoped. So I hope this year we will. Yeah,
that would be great. And then you touched on a little bit Black Hills Friends of Pollinators. Where did that come about? And because I'm actually not as familiar with that. Fill me in on that as well.
Okay, well, hopefully at the Spring Fling you'll hear a little bit more. But this program has not been as well developed. There's just not enough time, but it kind of came about early on. I had the years all here when with Lucy and I had been having a discussion about some people in the community that were very sensitive to some of the pesticides that people were using on their lawns. And they're so sensitive, they actually had to leave Hot Springs because the daughter was getting ill from the pesticides. So we were just talking about ways that we could help educate. I know a lot of people in this community really like using pesticides. They don't like to see dandelions on their lawns, etc. And I think there's just a lot of information that people aren't aware of about A, what the dangers of pesticides are, and B, that there are really there are tools and things that can be used and ways to build soil so that you don't really need to use those things. It just takes a little bit more planning, but it really can be done easily. So we just want to use it as a way to educate, and also obviously pollinators are critical for food and for pollinating food. So we want to encourage that. So so we're hoping to have we did a local, we're highlighting local individuals in the community that are pollinator friendly. And we did a virtual slideshow, and I think one of them will be presenting at the Spring Fling this next couple months. Next month?
In April.
In April.
2 months.
2 months, okay. Also, Lucy, we purchased some signs. Her friend made a beautiful logo, and we have some signs that are available at her shop. So if anybody has a pollinator-friendly yard, and there's some criteria, you can go to our websites. So we have 2 different separate Facebook pages for the Ditch the Disposables and the Black Hills Friends of Pollinators.
Okay.
And now we actually have a new website. It's called blackhillssustainableliving.com.
Very cool.
And that just so that we can put all of our programs and any other new ideas that either we generate or other people in the community that join us that are interested in these topics of, health of the environment. We would love to have you join our team. And the website is new, and we still have more development to add to it, a lot more resources to add. But we would love to have more people in the community join us, because as
Sure.
you can see, there's a lot going on.
There is.
We need help.
Yeah. One of the cool things that's more towards the not just for locals but for visitors as well. One cool thing that came about, as to take a step back to earlier, you talked about the community engagement process, and one of the kind of subcommittees of that was to emphasize health and wellness. And one of the things that came out of that was the Health and Wellness Business Directory. So tell us how that was developed, because that was a bit of a process as well. I mean, even just knowing what I know here at the Chamber, going through and doing like our Welcome magazine, which features Chamber members across the spectrum, but to pull off a publication that's essentially it's a brochure, like it's brochure sized, but it's actually a booklet. What was the process like getting that to print?
Yeah, so after our group kind of got back together, we had a little break, as I mentioned earlier. Deborah Johnston actually had this idea that because she's a wellness practitioner, and she pointed out that there are a lot of people in the community that have skills around these wellness practices, if you will, that are kind of in the shadows. A lot of people don't know about them. A lot of them weren't chamber members because, maybe they couldn't afford the membership fee or for whatever reason. So we thought, especially because Hot Springs, I love how your Bubble Up, introduction, it really speaks to, hey, that's what the root of this community is about the health, the wellness of the spring water. And so we really felt that it was important to highlight the health and wellness that is still happening in the community, and let people know about what that was. So there were a few people in our group that had publication skills,
experience,
and we were very lucky to have them. Hazel was one of them, and Cindy Rubin. But Deborah put a lot of work into this as well. So I don't know, we just started contacting people to see who was interested in participating, and we just diligently kept it moving until it
really turned out. It turned out beautifully, and I think we still have some here at the Chamber that folks can come pick up. Are you planning on revising that this year or next year? I know that it's 2018, 2019 on the current one. Yeah,
it took us a long time to get it completed, and also, our funds were limited. We're not a nonprofit. We had to, everyone that's in the directory had to contribute just so that we could publish it. So that's why there's a limited number at this point. Once we get to a point of we've run out, then we'll probably meet together as a group again and say, hey, are we ready to go another round?
Great.
Where do we want to go with this?
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing, couple other things that we wanted to touch on, Change for Peace and the Black Hills Time Banks. Go ahead and give us a quick rundown on each of those, because you've been involved in those as well. There's just so much, with all of these Citizen of the Year nominees, yourself included, you're all involved in so many different things that it's tough to, let alone get it through it in the time that we have in the podcast, which is thankfully more free form and we can just talk about it. But writing like the little blurbs and stuff where we have to cram people's resumes into like 2 paragraphs is really tough, because it's like everyone does so much.
It is true. That's one of the things I love about Hot Springs is there's such a variety of activities and people getting involved, and I love that. So and some things are already, last year as part of the Earth Day activities, I did some things on my own that were outside the Earth Day rummage sale, and I brought a movie to Hot Springs at the theater. It was a documentary called Living the Change. And it just was, they interviewed people all around New Zealand, because that's where the filmmakers were from, about ways to live sustainably and different things that people were doing. One of the things highlighted in there out of the numerous things was time banking, this concept of time banking. So somebody approached me after the film and said, hey, did you know that there was a Black Hills Time Bank? It's already done. You don't have to create it. And I was like, oh, cool. I love that kind of project. I don't have to start it. So I got into contact with the person that had started it. She was up in north of Rapid. Can't think of the town right now. And we had a conversation. We said, hey, we'd like to support you, what we're doing here. And there were actually a few people in the community like Lucy that were already signed up for the time bank. So basically, it's just a way for people like we've been discovering through this process that a lot of people already volunteer their time, which is cool. What's really great about the time bank is you could get credit for your hours of service, and then if you need something, then you can use your credit from somebody else in the time bank.
Wow.
So individuals can use it, as well as like a whole community organization can use it. So I mean, we're kind of doing it anyways, unofficially. But it's kind of nice because, like, I do a lot of volunteer work and things for people just because I want to.
Right.
But sometimes I need help. Like I'm not really good at sewing, so that's usually the thing I always put on there. I can put a request, hey, I need something done, and then somebody will do that for me. So it's just a way for us to share our talents and skills with each other. Yeah,
and it's certainly more structured. Rather than just, and that's one thing about Hot Springs, kind of what you were talking about, is that we do help each other, but oftentimes it's much more informal. It's the old style of, well, I think I know that person knows how to do that. And this sounds like it's more of a resource that everyone who's involved in it can tap into and connect better. Like you said, kind of that synergy among all the individuals. And then tell us lastly a little bit about Change for Peace, and then we'll get into our last kind of couple questions I had.
Okay. Well, this was actually just an inspiration I had when things in our country seem to be tumultuous. And
it's an understatement.
I actually woke up in the middle of the night. Like I had a dream, and I woke up. It was like so powerful. And it was kind of just to have this website. And my idea originally was to actually, if every business had a change jar, how a lot of people don't really like having change, and they just threw it in there. And then we used that money to, let's say, bring in peace changers, have a program to teach people mediation skills or communication skills. I mean, that was my original idea. I had put out the idea to people, not just in Hot Springs, but that I thought would be interested in the idea. And some people said, oh, you should do a nonprofit, da-da-da. It wasn't really flowing.
Sure.
So I let it go, but I was actually researching online, and I found this other website of somebody that had done this activity where they had made these little coins, and they were like peace coins, and they would leave them for people, and it was kind of like a way of reminding people to be peaceful or to have a positive message.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
So I kind of took that idea and I said, this kind of seems like something I had worked on before, where I leave the message of love when I travel. So I started a group where we would just get together and make art projects, and then, like my friend Mindy, I'm actually through Lucy, I met Mindy Journey, she lives up in Custer, and she makes origami peace doves. Have you seen those?
I think I have.
She leaves them around town a lot.
Yeah.
And she hands them out. She's a lovely lady that I've met, and we've done a few things. She came in and taught us how to do the peace doves, and it's something that you can just give to someone that maybe is having a bad day. And what's really neat, because I'm not as talented as doing origami, but I think painting rocks would be easy. So that's what I did for my activity.
Oh, very cool.
And then next thing I know, now that there's this other group that started
doing Hot Springs Rocks. Yeah.
So it's almost like the same thing. We had the same inspiration. So I'm really excited about that. But the main thing that's happening now with Change for Peace is usually on International Peace Day, which is September 27th-ish. I have been offering, again, an open opportunity for people to come together and just honor how can we be more peaceful in our own lives and with our neighbors, and hopefully those kind of activities will expand out into the larger or smaller community and then the larger global community.
Absolutely. Thank you for your effort, not only with Change for Peace, but across all of the programs that you've been involved in. So one thing I wanted to touch on leading from that is with Citizen of the Year, we have that award to recognize people in the community who have worked for the betterment of others and for the betterment of the community. But I wanted to ask you, as I've asked the other folks that I've talked with, who was an inspirational person in your life that inspired you, who you would say would be like your Citizen of the Year? You know, not necessarily of this year, but of any year.
Well, that's a good question. Maybe I didn't listen to everyone's interview. That I wasn't expecting that one. Gosh, there's so many inspirational people. I mean, people like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King and Mother Teresa. Those are the kind of the big ones that I think of. But even my sister and my mother were, women that I grew up with that were very strong-willed and went for things that they were interested in, and weren't shy about didn't feel like they needed to stay home and let other people do it. But if they were inspired by something, they put their heart and their hard work into it and went for it. So I think I probably got influenced by them as well.
That's great. And then the last question that I ask everyone is, what have been your favorite things about living in Hot Springs?
Wow.
That's a big question.
Yeah. I love living in a small town. I love being able just to walk downtown, and I love visiting with people. I mean, my husband and I laughed how every time we go downtown, we can't get anything done because you run into people everywhere, and everyone wants to chitty chat, and we both love that. I mean, it's such a friendly place. I love how people show up for each other. I mean, it's incredible. I have never seen the amount of when somebody gets sick or their house burns down. I mean, the way that people rally for each other around here is so amazing. It's wonderful. And of course, I'm a nature person, so I love the river. I love hiking. We went on this great hike yesterday in the freezing cold, and it was awesome. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but...
Oh, wonderful. Well, again, thank you for everything you do, and congratulations again on being nominated for Citizen of the Year.
Thank you very much.